1 year ago today, Kendrick Lamar's verse, unlike that, forced a nuclear moment in hip-hop, one that reignited competition to a place beyond just the cosmetics. In a few calculated bars, he dismantled the narrative of the big three, forced Drake and J. Cole into uncomfortable and compromising positions, and set the stage for one of the most significant rap confrontations of the modern era. A year later, the impact of that verse still reverberates, not just because of its lyrical brilliance, but because of the sheer strategic precision with which it was deployed. For years, mainstream rap discussions revolved around the idea of Kendrick, Drake, and J. Cole as the big three. While fans debated rankings, the industry consensus was that these three were the untouchable leaders of their generation. In one line, Kendrick rejected that entire narrative framework. He refused to be placed in the same tier as Drake and Cole, making it clear that they weren't his peers. They were beneath him. This wasn't just a diss. It was a reorganization of the battlefield and everyone on it. If Like That was a direct provocation for Drake, it was an indirect trap for J. Cole. While Cole had positioned himself as a contender for the king in the big three, Kendrick dismissed him with a single line. The mere act of responding to first-person shooter quickly proved Cole was mistaken for thinking he was in the same tier. That alone was enough to shake the dynamic. Cole had positioned himself as a friendly rival to both Kendrick and Drake, playing the role of the neutral middleman in the big three narrative. Kendrick effectively removed him from the equation by dismissing him so quickly that he wasn't even worth engaging in full. This forced J. Cole into a difficult position. If he responded aggressively, he risked igniting a war with Kendrick that he wasn't prepared for. If he did nothing, he looked like an afterthought in the rap hierarchy. J. Cole's decision to release 7-Minute Drill was a miscalculation. His tone was hesitant, and the track lacked the conviction necessary to challenge Kendrick. Worse, he immediately walked it back, apologizing and removing it from streaming platforms. This played right into Kendrick's hands. He barely had to say another word about Cole. Cole had already eliminated himself. The battle was now exclusively between Kendrick and Drake, with Cole watching from the sidelines. Before Like That, any debate about the best rapper included Drake and Cole. After Like That, the discussion shifted. It was now Kendrick versus Drake, with Cole reduced to collateral damage. Kendrick made this happen with one line. That's not just good rapping, that's elite strategy. While Kendrick's jab at Cole was enough to make waves, the primary target was Drake. The verse had an undercurrent of, "I see you, and I'm coming for you." It was a shot that demanded a response, one that would lead to Euphoria, 616 in LA, Meet the Grams, and Not Like Us. Kendrick's verse wasn't a full diss track, but that was exactly the point. By delivering a calculated jab rather than an all-out attack, Kendrick forced Drake into an impossible position. If Drake ignored it, he would look weak, as if he was afraid to engage. If Drake responded, he would enter a battle in a defensive posture and on Kendrick's terms. By striking first, Kendrick dictated the pace of the conflict. This is a classic strategy in warfare. Force your opponent to react rather than allowing them to attack on their own terms. Drake had spent years throwing subliminals at Kendrick, but he had the advantage of doing so at his own convenience. Like That eliminated that comfort. Kendrick's shot was so public and so undeniable that Drake had to respond or look weak. The brilliance of this move became clear as the battle unfolded. Once Drake engaged, Kendrick controlled the pace of the war. From a strategic standpoint, Kendrick's move created urgency and real danger for Drake's public image as a rapper and a power broker. Kendrick's verse didn't just attack Drake's reputation, it attacked his perceived power. Drake built his career on controlling narratives. Drake was always able to dictate the rules of engagement. Like That shattered that ability. By positioning himself as the aggressor, Kendrick made Drake look defensive. In hip-hop, the person chasing the battle is always at a disadvantage. Drake was now forced to prove himself while Kendrick sat back, methodically choosing when to strike. Kendrick's verse on Like That marked the beginning of the end for Drake, not just in the context of their beef, but in the broader sense of his cultural dominance. Before Like That, Drake was seen as untouchable, an artist who had survived every challenge, controlled the industry on his terms, and dictated the pace of any conflict. In a few calculated bars, Kendrick Lamar forced Drake into a position he had never been in before, one where he was no longer the aggressor, but the defender. Drake's historical strategy was classic: throw rocks and hide his hand, baiting Kendrick into a response while maintaining plausible deniability. He wanted to diminish Kendrick's status without ever facing him head on. Like That ended that game, forcing Drake into a battle he could not control. Like That wasn't just a diss verse. It was the moment the pre-existing cracks in Drake's persona became too big to ignore. This instantly tilted the power dynamic in Kendrick's favor. Beyond Drake, Like That also disrupted the industry itself. Hip-hop had been coasting on a complacent status quo, with the Big Three narrative maintaining an illusion of equilibrium. With Like That, Kendrick Lamar executed a preemptive strike that leveraged the art of war and game theory to devastating effect, signaling that he was prepared for any counterattack before it even materialized. Sun Tzu stresses the importance of shaping the battlefield before the enemy can, and Kendrick did exactly that. By moving first, he seized the initiative, forcing Drake into a reactive position where his options were already constrained. This was not just an attack, but a calculated forcing move, a concept in game theory where one player makes a move that compels the opponent into a narrow set of responses, all of which lead to disadvantageous positions. Crucially, Like That was not an all-out offensive, but a low-cost, high-reward strategic poke. Yet the impact was disproportionate, creating asymmetrical pressure on Drake. Sun Tzu's principle, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting, applies here. Before Kendrick even escalated to euphoria or Not Like Us, he had already forced Drake into a no-win situation where his brand, his ego, and his credibility were all at risk, irrespective of his next move. In iterated game scenarios, an early decisive move establishes a precedent. It signals that escalation will be met with escalation. This was a dominant strategy in that Kendrick pre-committed to war while demonstrating an ability to control its tempo. Unlike Pusha T's shock and awe approach in the story of Adidon, Kendrick's attack was layered, designed for sustained attrition rather than a single death blow. The brilliance of Like That was that it set the terms of engagement. Any response from Drake would only deepen his entanglement in a game Kendrick already had strategic control of. Like That wasn't just a verse, it was a power move that cemented Kendrick Lamar as a lyrical assassin. The most war-ready, the most calculated, and in a way unique to him alone, the most dangerous rapper of his generation.